Welcome to the Echo Tips podcast. Way to go!
Here's a sneak peek into what we're going to cover in this week's episode of the Echo Tips podcast. This is the very beginning of the show, by the way. So I'll ask, computer, can you navigate chapters in this podcast?
I can't navigate chapters in this podcast.
Oh, now
Would you like to skip to the next section instead?
Yes. Well, hello, and welcome to the Echo Tips podcast. Good to have you returning listeners and you new listeners as well this week. At a high level, we're going to be discussing the topic again on our favorite A-Lady, and that is A-Lady Plus. And we're going to be talking about in particular with this limited rollout, although it's not all that limited based on an interview I saw with Panos Panay in July. I think it's probably I think he said 1 million people it's been rolled out to in the U.S. So, anywho, I think it was on Tech Dirt or something like that. We're going to talk about, in particular, bugs, right? You may have been wondering about that. Maybe you've encountered that. You're like, is this just me? Or is this happening to other people? And it's hard to say. With something like this, there's probably a lot of A/B testing out there that is, in other words, to say the A-Lady device that you're maybe beta testing is slightly different than mine, or they're iterating on different things at different levels to see what works and what doesn't. So there may be some variability in this, but these are some things that I suspect are probably some common problems, and I'm going to list at least 8 today that we're going to kind of discuss. Some are itsy bitsy, some pre-exist with the A-Lady Plus, like in other words, they've been there for a while, and others are exclusive pretty much to the A-Lady Plus. In fact, I would say that's the majority of them, actually. Think about this. Probably at least 6 out of the 8 are totally brand new, if not 7 out of the 8. So, anywho, but we're going to dive into that today and share that with you. Now, first off, for our new listeners who have never heard our program before, hello, welcome. My name is David Ward. I'm the host of the Echo Tips podcast, now in its 8th season. I had to stop and think there. I was like, we concluded 7, that would make us 8. So we're in our 8th season. We're a weekly show. We usually put out new episodes around towards the middle to the late end of the week. We've been doing this all those past seasons, so we have over 360 some episodes in our back catalog, and you can go check that out. I'll mention some ways you can find that later in the show. Let's see. And you can reach out to us with thoughts or suggestions about a future show as well. Now, for you new listeners, like I said, the show, as I may have already implied, is about A-Lady. That is Alexa. The devices, the software, the hardware, the media, the playback, the games, the home automation, whatever surrounds the A-Lady, we talk about it. And we even talk about competing devices as well. And as of late, if you are especially interested in this topic related to the beta of the AI-infused A-Lady, I would encourage you to check out the back catalog. Continue to go back through the catalog, see from the very beginning where we dipped our toes into it, how we got enrolled in it, some of our early feelings, and then a wide variety of things that we've experimented with. And so this is our first kind of I'm really chronicling the bugs today that we're experiencing. So as I said, we're going to be covering 8 of those today. And before we dive into that, I'll mention the way you can reach out to us at the show, and that is Echo Tips Podcast at CERT, C-E-R-T, Dr. DOCTOR.com. Okay, so let's press on in our show. Okay, so we're back, and we're going to be talking about bugs. Squish them, smash them, get rid of them. Well, at least we hope. But I think the first thing is acceptance. We need to all know that this is a problem, and maybe reach out to Amazon in different ways. There's a way to give feedback on the Echo. In fact, you just say, hey, lady, I want to give feedback, and that's super easy to do. My Echo is presently going to be set up to the wake word word that Captain Kirk and Captain Picard used today. That is COMPUTER. So if you do have an echo and hearing distance in my voice that would respond to that wake word, it'd be best to shut its ears off, perhaps even if that's the device you're listening onto at the very moment. So we're going to start at the top of our list, and this may be, well, incidentally, it's at the top of my list, but I think it's actually at the top of my list. It's probably one of the most important things I would like to see fixed. And this is in connection with home automation. So let me give you an example here. I'm sitting here in the studio, and I can say, "Computer, start the microwave for 3 minutes."
The microwave door has been inactive for too long.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I don't know if he's ever said that before. That is an old A-Lady response. Maybe they actually have it working now. Oh, let me go test something. I'm going to be right back. Through the power of time travel and post-production editing, I'll be right back. Okay, now let's try it again. Computer, microwave for 15 seconds. Oh.
Microwaving for 15 seconds.
Well, holy Batman and molies. Okay, so I guess they've just enabled that. It had to be in the last day or so because I did this a day or so ago. I had access to all home automation functions that I've always had with the A-Lady, except for the ability to control the microwave. That is the actually energizing of the microwave for a certain number of seconds or at a certain power level. I could control other functions in the microwave, which is a range unit. That means it's over the stovetop, so it has a vent fan that can be activated and lights. I could control all of that, but and that right there was my phone dinging that it was done with the 15 seconds. So it actually is working again. Hallelujah. Okay, so never mind that, guys. Looks like the microwave functionality or certain types of appliances that were, I guess, deemed unsafe or they didn't want to have connection with the beta is now available. Okay, so we can mark that off the list. There's only 7 more to go. All right, let's press on. Okay, so we're going to press on to our next item, and this deals with an interesting way of navigating audio called chapter markers. Now, to be fair, chapter markers have seemed to never have worked on the Echo, so it's not like it was a previous feature with the old A-Lady devices, but it would be a nice feature to see. And it seems like there are allusions to it possibly working, but it doesn't seem to work quite yet. So what I wanted to do is take a podcast that I know has chapter markers and see if we can navigate it and see if you get some of the feedback. We'll see what you think of this feedback. So it's the ability inside of a podcast, which could be anything. It could be a lesson. It could be a webinar. It could be anything, and navigate back and forth to specific sections of it without having to maybe jump ahead 30 seconds, jump ahead 30 minutes, that kind of command. And then, you're kind of playing it by ear really there. You don't know where the next section begins. Chapter markers help solve that functionality. So one podcast I know of that has that is Access On by the National Federation for the Blind with Jonathan Mosen. So let's see if I can play that. Now, I often have trouble trying to play that, which goes towards another bug point here in a second. But let's give this a try. Computer, play Access On podcast.
Here's Access On from Captain's Amazon Music. Resuming episode 40, Smart Glasses discussion. Uber breaks Braille screen input in its iOS app.
Okay,
and
so
more
got
from
it.
the Technology Vendor Showcase.
Contemplate which one to go with. If you have a child in your life, the Yoto player may be worth a look, and maybe it
Okay,
has
so
use
now
for
let's
others too.
ask.
And
This is the
there's
very
more from
beginning of the show, by the
Technology
way.
Vendor Showcase from
So
our
I'll
recent
ask,
national convention
computer?
in New Orleans.
Can you navigate chapters in this podcast?
I can't navigate chapters in this podcast.
Oh,
Would you
now
like
it's
to skip to the next section instead?
yes. Let's see if it,
Skipping ahead to the next section of the podcast.
see what that
Now
does.
playing innovations in AI. A meeting
like
headset
you.
recommendation.
Want-
Adjusting JAWS and system volume from within JAWS.
No, this is the beginning of another show. Yeah. Computer,
Welcome.
next chapter.
Skipping to the next section of the podcast.
See, it's using
Now
the
playing
phrasing.
Smart
Remind people,
Glasses
listeners
discussion.
contemplate
Uber
which
breaks
one
braille
to go
screen
with.
input.
If you have a child in your life,
All right, I'm
the
gonna
Yozo player
mute
may
that
be
for a
worth
second. Computer, stop. So it seems to give, it has some of the language in there, like sections, and that it's going to do it, but then it doesn't seem to do it. It just kind of, it either goes to the previous episode or a next episode or restarts that episode. So it's almost like the coding is preparatory. It's close to being there, but it ain't quite there yet. So very interesting, but nonetheless, that's where we're at now. Okay, so let's move on to our next point, which is podcast providers being a little willy-nilly. Now, I don't know if this has happened to me much in the last week or so, and I can't really probably demonstrate to you because it's kind of one of those intermittent bugs, and it may have been resolved, honest to God. But I would run into a weirdness where, in the app you designate that Spotify is my podcast provider, or TuneIn is my podcast provider, or that Amazon Prime Music is my podcast provider. Now, that's a separate category from music, right? Where I'd say, go play Taylor Swift. And if I say play, Billy Bob's podcast, it should by default go to whatever my standard provider is that's set. In this case, let's say it's Spotify, and try and find Billy Bob's podcast. And if it can't find it, then try and match something close to it. Or you might see then a fall over to checking some of the other providers it may have access to. For example, Amazon Music, I would think, is probably a provider it always has access to. And since the very earliest of days, it's had access to TuneIn. So my experience with this is I'll at times get some weird responses where it'll play a podcast on one network and then I try to resume it, and maybe it's in my phrasing or something. I say go, and it really goes and plays the show, but now it's almost like it's forgotten which network it's on, and so now it's on Amazon Prime Music. And it's restarted. It's also lost its bookmarking feature. So it's a little peculiar how that works. And it really gets me screwed up because then I try to go back and then it's like lost its bookmarking function or whatever. So it's a little frustrating. So that is another problem. I haven't seen a lot of it lately, but it was kind of a weird kind of issue. Oh, one other thing I want to mention about this is, for example, earlier we listened to the Access On podcast. Sometimes I'll run into scenarios where I say that, and actually I was surprised it played the right show today. Often it'll and this happened before, it'll mix up Access On, or it'll find some similar podcast that the naming convention may sound similar. Now, one of the neat things that I can do with the AI-infused A-Lady is I can actually almost like reason with her. And I can say, okay, Jonathan Mosen has a podcast for the NFB, right? What is that called? And she'll come back to me and say the name. And then I'll say, okay, I'd like to listen to the latest episode of that podcast. And then, because the actual typed out nomenclature is now in her system, she doesn't seem to have problems matching that up and finding that. So it's kind of a weird quirk, but I actually kind of really enjoy that. That's a way that it gets around some of its dictation, transcription foibles. But one problem I see with it is it never seems to learn. Now, I say that, and today it actually works, so maybe it is learning and it played Jonathan Mosen's podcast. But typically, I'll come back and I have to take it through those steps all over again, and it doesn't seem to remember. So I think some sort of retention of shows that I like or I listen to, if I listen to them more than twice or three times, you should earmark it. And if it's a high difficulty name matching, pattern matching, then you should probably push to the top of the stack or something like that of things that you're guessing that it might be. So I would like to see some sort of learning curve in that regards. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item. And this is one that has plagued the Amazon Echo for a very long time. And that is fast forward and rewinding. It is a travesty when it comes to podcasts. It doesn't seem to matter what network you use, whether you're pulling from Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneIn, Apple, it doesn't matter. She is a train wreck. Like, it could be a 2-hour podcast and I'm 30 seconds in and I know I want to just fast forward 5 minutes through the commercials and everything else. And she'll say there's not 5 minutes left in the podcast. I know there's more than 5 minutes left in the podcast. So this is very, very common. The exact same problems we've been dealing with for years. The ability to fast forward and rewind is just a travesty. And the rewind function is just as bad. I could be far along in a show and I need to rewind and she'll be like, well, and plus, I honestly don't know how accurate she is in the fast forward and rewind commands. I kind of get the vibe that she's generally pretty accurate. I mean, based on, I go back 30 seconds or a minute, I feel like that's pretty spot on. But it may be just the fact that she's completely lost as to where she is in the track and how long the track is. That it's just complete confusion in that regard. Now, the irony is, somewhere in the coding, it knows where it is, because if I stop the show and I come back 3 days from now, it will resume the show. So that is in there, but there's some sort of breakage between the connection of that variable and the fast forward and rewind commands, especially when I say go ahead 15 minutes. I mean, it's just a basic math calculation, right, guys? I mean, this is probably JavaScript and HTML. It could be easily done, but it is terribly broken, and it's really kind of frustrating, to be honest, especially when you listen to longer form podcast or you're trying to get somewhere. Now, ironically, I think in audiobooks, not that I often jump ahead an hour or back 30 minutes. I will do small increment jumps, like go back 5 minutes or go back 30 seconds. In audiobooks through Audible, it's pretty accurate. So, I mean, even if they could just take the code base from that and make it applicable to their full functional podcast realm. That actually brings up an interesting question. If I used Audible as my podcast provider of choice, assuming I can do that, which I do know there's podcasts on Audible, would that use the proper mechanic engines on the back end that would work? That's interesting. But either way, this should be a problem that should be fixed. Okay, our next error I'm going to talk about is one that kind of surfaced recently for me and is exclusive to the A-Lady Plus, which is the ability to verbally create routines. Now, I did several episodes on creating routines, going back and editing and modifying routines. We talked about temporary routines, which are these basically self-wiping, self-disappearing, like disappearing ink, they run once and then they're done episodes. So I did 3 episodes at least on routines in the new A-Lady Plus. But after doing that final episode with you about editing and modifying, I did run across a weird quirk. When I was doing that demo for you guys and crafting that, all along, it created a duplicate routine with almost the exact same name. So it was like, whatever it was, driveway sensor 1 and then driveway sensor 2. And so it created a duplicate routine. Now, I should have took the time to go back and see if it disabled the first routine, which would make sense, and then activated the second routine. In other words, only the second one would ever run. But needless to say, that is, I feel like, a little bit of a bug. It's creating duplications in your database there of routines, which could be kind of terribly confusing, even if it does disable the first one. If it doesn't disable the first one, then you have a real problem, because every time a car would pull into my driveway, it's maybe potentially trying to trigger 2 separate routines that are trying to do, almost identical things, but then I modified the last one to do something differently. So that's terribly confusing. Now, I recently went into a routine and tried to edit it. And in fact, let's actually try and do that. Computer, do I have a routine with shower in the name?
Yes, you have a routine named Shower Time. It's triggered when you say shower time and includes several actions like playing music and sounds, adjusting volume, and making announcements.
Okay, what is the first music that I play after the jingle, the opening jingle?
Let me check that for you.
Okay.
After the opening jingle, which is the Infinite Galaxy sound, the first music played in your shower time routine is alternative rock from the early 2000s shuffle on Spotify for 7 minutes and 50 seconds.
Okay. I would like to change that to 90s alternative rock shuffle on Amazon Music. Okay, let's see if he can do it.
You bet. Just a moment while I work on that.
Yeah. Processing. Boop, 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 boop,
I
boop.
apologize, but I couldn't update the routine because the trigger phrase shower time is already being used by another routine. Would you like to try a different trigger phrase for this routine?
Stop. Okay, I'm going to mute him. So you start to see there, I ran into some quirks here occasionally. One, we had the duplicate effect. That one is triggered by a very specific verbal command, which probably doubles as its name by default. And so I don't know if it was the process of trying to edit it or then it was trying to duplicate it, but it had the same name matching. But either way, you saw the whole thing started to fall apart before. And I've got to the point where it literally is saying, I'm going to try again. I think there's a problem. And it would do it. And then it comes back and I detect a problem. I'm going to try again. And it wasn't quite an infinite loop. I think it did it at least 2 or 3 times in a row. But yeah, there's some real slight polish that needs done there because there's something just a slight bit hinky with that. But that is another item on our list. Okay, guys. So now we're going to move on to our next item after talking about those routines. And this is that is the text-to-speech voice engines. I would like to mention are fantastic, but their volume seems slightly louder than the rest of the content. It's a subtle difference, but it is kind of noticeable. So I just think that's a slight little quirk. There just needs to be a recalibration of that. The text, and it's probably because they're brighter and stuff like that. They project better, but they are slightly louder than the actual media volume that you're typically playing, which can be a little disorienting. I think they could tone it down just a slight, take it down half a decibel or something like that. All right, well, let's move on to our final item. Our next to last item I'm going to mention here is a problem I've been dealing with from the very beginning in my stereo pair here in the studio, where I have 2 dots that are stereo paired as a left and right speaker for music, which, by the way, sounds fabulous. But the one problem I run into is it periodically will start to amplify the volume. So it's almost like it hears itself and it moves the volume up. And so I don't know what that bug is, but it's a little disorienting. And it hasn't been too bad, I think, as of late. It was very noticeable in the early days, but I think that problem still persists. All right, let's move on to our final bug. Our final bug I'm going to mention today actually just happened to me today. And is so strange, I'm not too sure I could reproduce it either. And it may be just kind of a one-off, but I will mention that it has happened to me. You may recall in a previous episode, we did a pairing with my phone so that I could send text messages from my Echo, which, by the way, and I'm using an iPhone, is amazing. It's pretty cool. Now, the weird thing is I can't read them with my Echo like I can with my Apple HomePod, which is integrated into the Apple ecosystem with my iPhone. But I can send them, and it's pretty snazzy. It's almost like a Bluetooth keyboard. It literally sends them through my phone, and so on the other end, people see my text message coming from my number. And it literally is in my history, so it's bouncing through Bluetooth to my phone. And periodically, I've forgotten that I even set it up, and I'll go and say something, and the pairing is still happening with my phone. When I walk in the house from wherever, it connects to that, and then I can send messages. And so it's pretty seamless in that regard. I haven't used it enough to know how robust it is, because Bluetooth can always be a little flaky. But I had something weird happen today when I was trying to set up the Echo to connect to our mixer here for our studio recording. And I'm like, what is going on? And I was like, did I Bluetooth pair with the mixer? Did we record something off the telephone recently? What's going on? And then I did a play button on the media content on my phone, and the audio popped out on my Echo Dot here in the studio. And I can't conceive of any reason I've ever had a need in a long, long time to Bluetooth audio from my phone to my Echo. And in fact, the only reason I can think of that pairing being listed there the way it was and allowing that transfer is because of the Bluetooth pairing I did for text messaging, which kind of makes some quasi sense. It's almost like a voice command system that is in turn passing that audio over to the iPhone and sending a text message. So I don't, or maybe there was a driver mix-up or something weird. It's just bizarre to me that I hit the play button on my iPhone and the audio came out on my Amazon Echo, because I can't conceive of any reason for any of the recent shows that I haven't done shows like that since like the first or second season, where I had some weird Bluetooth stuff that I did it intentionally, but I can't conceive of any reason that I would have left that pairing or anything like that. So I think it's connected with this recent pairing for text messaging. But it's quirky that it instead of, that's usually you would think one way. It's sending stuff from the Echo to the phone that in turn is sending the text message to my friend Billy Bob. Not the other way around, where my phone is sending audio and then it's coming out on my Echo. Yeah, that's kind of seems like a bug to me as well. Okay, well, that will wrap things up for this episode. If you have thoughts or suggestions, you can email me at ecotipspodcast@certdoctor.com, and you can find our back catalog listing on that same domain name and click on blog. But until next time, we thank you, as always, for listening.